I'm Dr. Andrea Mendoza Vascones. I am an assistant professor of public health at the School of Public Health at Brown University. Though I currently work remotely from San Diego, my hometown, where I have focused my research on promoting health and well-being among vulnerable populations, particularly Latino populations. I am here representing the Medical Society Consortium on Climate and Health and the American Lung Association. These are two organizations that have been advocating for a really long time for equitable responses to the health impacts of climate change. And they represent over 700,000 doctors and clinical practitioners who share a commitment to protecting public health from climate change. And I'm making time on my schedule today, and this is actually really hard for me. Just to share, I'm an introvert, so this is actually really hard for me. But it is really important for me to also stand here and speak to you. Because I care deeply about health, well-being, and the consequences of climate change on health and well-being. And so, first of all, I want to thank you and thank the congressman for everything he's doing for protecting our health and our communities, for signing on to the Inflation Reduction Act, and for everything else that he's doing in this sense. And I also want to share a little bit of my story and why I'm here with you. So again, I'm a public health researcher, and my research has focused mainly on the promotion of behaviors such as physical activity, for chronic disease prevention, etc. But in the past couple of years, or maybe a few years, I've grown increasingly interested and transitioned a little bit into the field of climate and health. Because the more I learn about climate change, the more I realize that everything that I'm doing for promoting health and well-being, and all the public health gains that we've made in the past decades are going to be irrelevant in a few years, in 10 years, if we don't address climate change. There's going to be huge setbacks in all the gains that we've made in public health and in health equity. And in a more personal note, I am a mother to a 4-year-old, and I am expecting another baby. And if you have children in your life, I don't know if you do, you may be able to relate to the feeling of holding your baby for the first time and seeing them so delicate and vulnerable and dependent on you. And when I held my baby for the first time, I promised her that I was going to keep her safe and protect her with my life. And as a public health researcher, I know that climate change is probably the biggest threat, or definitely the biggest threat to me being able to keep that promise. And I have personally had a glimpse of what our futures could look like with climate change, because I was, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was a postdoctoral fellow at Stanford. And, everyone was still isolating, and nobody knew what was safe or not, so we were all stuck at home protecting ourselves. There was a heat wave at the same time for like 2 weeks, over 100 degrees in temperature. And at some point it reached like 108 degrees. We didn't have AC in the house, so it was really hot, and then a forest fire at the same time. And so there were ashes everywhere. You couldn't, if you went outside, you couldn't see your hand if you stretched it out because of all the ashes. And so it also, like, we couldn't go outside because of my daughter. Like, it's dangerous. The air quality issues, right, are dangerous especially for kids and their lung health, etc. But at some point it was so hot inside that I decided, let's go for a walk, let's wear our masks. And I asked her to wear her mask, and for the first time after trying for many months, or a few months, she wore it, and I think it was out of fear because it was such a weird landscape. And I just remember seeing her little eyes behind the mask, like piercing eyes, and that memory is stuck in my head forever. And I think, I just felt at that point I'm in an apocalyptic like movie or something like that, and just thinking about how that what we're losing brought me sorrow too, a lot of sorrow. So I think these events I know as a public health researcher that these events are going to get only increasingly common and also commonplace. So whether, it's forest fires in Northern California, floods elsewhere, more epidemics, pandemics because of the proliferation of disease vectors, droughts that are going to destabilize our food system, which in my opinion, how delicate our food system and how easy it can be impacted by things like droughts and floods is the scariest thing about climate change, because I can't imagine, for instance, not being able to feed our children. So in general, I think climate health is already having a lot of impacts on health and will impact at least our quality of life for everyone, regardless of our location or our economic condition. Even if we do have the economic means to protect our families, we're going to be stuck indoors, for instance, for weeks at a time when things like these happen, or have to evacuate our homes, etc. So at least our quality of life is going to be severely impacted by it, regardless of our economic status and our location. But I am more concerned actually about people from low socioeconomic backgrounds and, for instance, ethnic minorities, etc., who may not have the means to protect their families and to protect their lives, for whom it's not a matter of quality of life, it's a matter of life and death. So as a mother and a public health researcher, I decided to come here to first thank you and the congressman for what you're already doing, but second, to ask you to please not hold back. And if there are children in your life, to fight to protect them from the biggest threat to our civilization right now. And I promised my daughter, as I mentioned, that I was going to keep her safe and that I was going to protect her with my life. And part of the reason that I'm here is that.